If you're a coach or consultant on LinkedIn, you've probably noticed something. The fact that the posts that get the most engagement, the most comments, and the most DMs aren't necessarily the ones with the best tactics or the most information. They're actually the ones with the best stories. Because stories do something that tactics alone can't. They create emotional connection. They actually make you memorable, and then they build trust as a result. So here's the truth. People don't necessarily only buy from experts. They buy from experts that they actually trust. And trust isn't built through credentials and case studies alone. It's also built through stories, because when you share your journey, your struggles, lessons learned, you then become relatable and you become human. And that's when people, in many cases, actually then want to work with you. But here's the problem. Most people on LinkedIn don't actually know how to tell stories effectively. So they either end up sharing stories that are too long and then it just loses the reader's interest, or they end up sharing stories that don't actually have a point and then it doesn't really connect with their offer. And so when your stories don't land, you end up then missing out on one of the most powerful tools for building authority and attracting clients. So through the course of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to use storytelling on LinkedIn. I'll walk you through a tactical framework so that you can create stories that actually engage, build authority, and convert prospects into clients. And it's the same storytelling approach that I've used to build a brand with over 55,000 followers on the platform while generating over 10 million impressions on my content in the last year alone. It's also the same framework that we've leveraged to help clients to create content that deeply resonates and attracts premium opportunities. So by the end of this video, you'll have a clear storytelling framework that you can use in your next post immediately. Now, as I mentioned, you can see on screen here the 55,000 followers that I have, the 10 million impressions that we had last year. So with all of that said, let's dive into the video, starting with really the core problem. Now, right now, most of your content is probably forgettable. I can imagine that you're sharing tactics, tips, frameworks, and that is valuable, don't get me wrong. But when someone scrolls through their feed and then sees your post and read it, they maybe like it. They're probably then moving on, and 5 minutes later, they don't even remember your name or your message, and they didn't feel compelled to reach out. And the reason why is because the information alone doesn't actually create connection. People can get tactics and tips from 1,000 different sources. And so what you got to think about is what they can't get anywhere, right? And from everywhere. And that's your unique story, your journey, your struggles, your lessons learned. And that's what really makes you memorable. That's what ends up building trust. Now, the second part of the problem is that most people who try to tell stories on LinkedIn, they get it wrong. So they share long, rambling stories. There's no real clear point. Or they share a personal story that just doesn't really have anything to do with the business. And then when your stories don't connect to your expertise or your offer, it kind of just becomes entertainment, not really an actual conversion tool. So here's the real truth here. Effective storytelling on LinkedIn isn't about sharing every single detail of your life, but it is about strategically sharing stories that demonstrate your expertise, they build trust, and position you as the solution to your ideal client's problem. When you do that, your stories actually become one of your most powerful marketing assets. So the question becomes, well, how do you tell stories on LinkedIn that actually build authority and attract clients? What's that framework? And that's what we're going to break down in these next 3 steps. So the first step is to really understand the 3 story types that actually work on LinkedIn, because not all stories are equally effective, right? Some stories build authority, some build connection, and some demonstrate results. So you need to use all 3 of them strategically. Now, here are the 3 story types. The first one is the origin story. So this is really the story of how you got started in your field and why you do what you do. And the reason this can be valuable is because it answers the question, what led you to this work? Origin stories really build connection because they make you more relatable, and they show that you weren't always necessarily an expert. You had to start somewhere. So for example, this is of course an invented story, but it just gives you an example of how you could be thinking about this. 5 years ago, I was a consultant spending 15 hours per week on cold outreach. I was exhausted, burnt out, and barely even breaking even. I knew then there had to be a better way, and that's when I started experimenting with LinkedIn. I repositioned my profile, started posting strategic content, and within 6 months, I had replaced all of my cold outreach with inbound leads. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping consultants to build LinkedIn authority, because I've lived the transformation. So can you see what this does? It shows your journey, it makes you more relatable, and it positions you as someone who actually understands the struggle because you've been there yourself. Now, the second type of story is the transformation story. And this is the story of a client or someone that you've helped, right? And so it follows the before after structure, where they were, what changed, and where are they now. So transformation stories build credibility because they demonstrate that your methods actually work. So here's another example. In this particular case, right? A client came to me 6 months ago. He was a B2B consultant spending 5K per month on LinkedIn ads and getting low quality leads. We repositioned his profile, optimized his content strategy, and built an engagement system. Within 30 days, he had 4,000 new followers and was getting multiple inbound direct messages every single week from qualified prospects. He cancelled his ad spend. That's the power of organic LinkedIn authority. You see, this type of story demonstrates results, and then it positions you as someone who can actually deliver the transformation that your ideal client wants. Now, the third type of story is the lesson story. So this is the story of a mistake that you made, a challenge that you faced, or a lesson that you learned. And it follows the structure of what happened, what you learned, and how it applied to your audience. So lesson stories build authority because they show that you've gained wisdom through experience. So for example, again, another example story here. I used to think that posting every day on LinkedIn was key to growth. So I posted every single day for 3 months, and then I burned out. The quality of my content dropped and my engagement actually decreased. And that's when I learned the most important lesson. Quality beats quantity. I cut my posting frequency to 3 times per week and really focused on high value content, and my engagement skyrocketed. Now I teach my clients the same principle. You don't need to post every day to build authority. Now, this type of story positions you as someone who's learned through trial and error and has valuable insights to share. So here's the tactical framework for you. I want you to rotate between these 3 story types in your content. 1 origin story per month, 1 transformation story per week, and 1 lesson story each and every week. This keeps your content varied, and then it ensures that you're building connection, credibility, and authority as well. Now, step number 2 is to use the story structure framework, because once you know what type of story that you want to tell, you need to structure it in a way that keeps people reading and delivers a clear takeaway. And the way that you do that is with this 5-part structure: hook, context, conflict, resolution, and lesson. So let me break down each of these components. So first of all is part 1, which is the hook. So this is your opening line, and it really needs to stop the scroll and make people want to read more. So the best hooks create curiosity, they call out a pain, or they make a bold statement. So for example, I lost 50K before I learned this lesson, or 5 years ago I was on the verge of quitting my business, or a client doubled his revenue in 90 days, here's what he did. So you can see the hook is critical, because if you don't hook them in that first line, they're just not even going to read the rest of the story. Now, the second part is the context. So this is where you set the stage. You give the reader the background that they need to understand the story, who was involved, what was the situation, and what were you trying to achieve. So for example, I was a consultant 6 months into my business. I was doing everything right, posting content, engaging with prospects, sending cold DMs, but I wasn't getting any clients. My savings were running out and I was starting to panic. So you can see the context here makes the story relatable, and then it helps the reader to understand why the conflict even matters. Now, the third piece is the conflict itself. So this is the challenge, the problem, or the turning point. Basically, what went wrong? What obstacles did you face? And this is the most important part of the story, because conflict creates tension, and tension keeps people reading. So an example of this could be, then I got a message from a prospect. He said, your content is great, but I can't tell what you actually do. Are you a coach, a consultant? What problem do you solve? That's when I realized my positioning was all wrong. I was trying to serve everyone, and as a result, I was attracting no one. So you can see here that the conflict is actually what makes the story interesting, because without that conflict, there's no real story. It just basically is information at that point. Now, the fourth part is the resolution. So this is how you solved the problem and then overcame the challenge. So what did you do? What changed? This is where you demonstrate your expertise and then show that you have the solution. So for example, I spent the next week completely repositioning my LinkedIn presence. I got laser focused on my niche, B2B coaches and consultants who hate cold outreach. I rewrote my headline, my about section, and my content strategy to speak directly to that audience. Now, within 2 weeks, I had 3 inbound leads, and within a month, I closed my first 10K client. So the resolution shows that you actually know how to solve the problem that your ideal client is facing. And then the fifth part is the lesson. So this is really the takeaway. So what's the one insight or principle that your audience should remember? This is where you basically connect the story to your expertise and then position yourself as the guide. So for example, the lesson, I'm going to read out what could be an example here. You could say the lesson, clarity beats cleverness. When you try to serve everyone, you attract no one. But when you get laser focused on a specific niche and speak directly to their pain point, everything changes. And that's the power of repositioning. Now, the lesson is what makes the story valuable, right? It gives the reader something actionable that they can actually apply to their own situation. So here's the complete structure in action, right? You've got the hook. I lost my first 10K client because of one mistake. The context, I was 3 months into my consulting business. I just closed my first high ticket client, 10K for a 90-day engagement. I was thrilled. The conflict, but 2 weeks into the project, the client called and said, this isn't what I expected. I thought you were going to handle everything, but it feels like I'm doing most of the work. And he asked for a refund. The resolution, I gave him the refund and spent the next week analyzing what went wrong. I realized I hadn't set clear expectations. I hadn't defined deliverables, timelines, or responsibilities. From that point on, I created a detailed onboarding process for every client, clear deliverables, clear timelines, clear communication. The lesson, clarity prevents conflict. If you don't set clear expectations up front, you'll lose clients, even if your work is great. Now I teach every coach and consultant that I've worked with, clarity is the foundation of client satisfaction. So that's the story structure framework in action: hook, context, conflict, resolution, and lesson. Use this structure every time you tell a story, and you'll find that your content will just be more engaging, more memorable, and ultimately more effective as well. Now, the third step with all of this is to actually connect every story to your offer. And here's what I mean by that. A story without a call to action is basically just entertainment, right? It might get engagement, but it's not going to actually convert prospects into clients. So you need to bridge from the story to your expertise and then invite people to take the next step. Because most people make one of two mistakes. Either they tell a great story but don't connect it to their offer, or they make the connection too salesy and then it just feels forced. But there is a middle ground, a more subtle, natural bridge that positions you as the solution without being pushy. And here's how you can go about doing it. After you deliver the lesson, you add a soft call to action that invites engagement or offers help. And there are 3 ways that you can do this. The first CTA is to invite engagement. And this is where you ask a question or invite people to share their experience. So for example, have you ever lost a client because of unclear expectations? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. This keeps the conversation going and it positions you as someone who's interested in their challenges. The other option is to just offer value. So this is where you offer to share some additional insights or resources. So for example, if you're struggling with client onboarding, I've created a simple framework that's helped dozens of consultants to set clear expectations and avoid conflicts. Drop a comment with the word onboarding and I'll send it to you. This positions you as helpful and it gives you a reason to continue the conversation in DMs. CTA option number 3 is then to invite them to work with you. So this is where you make a subtle offer. For example, if you're a coach or consultant who wants to build a LinkedIn presence that attracts high quality inbound leads so that you never have to deal with unclear expectations from cold prospects again, drop a comment below with the word authority and I'll send you a breakdown of how we help consultants do exactly that. Now this bridges from the story to your offer in a much more natural way. Because you're not saying buy my program, instead you're saying if this resonates with you, here's how I can help. Now here's the key with this, the CTA should feel like a natural extension of your story. If your story is about positioning, your CTA should offer to help with positioning. If your story is about client onboarding, then your CTA should offer to help with that. The connection should be pretty obvious. So here's a complete example, right? The story would be, you tell a transformation story about a client who went from cold outreach to inbound leads on LinkedIn. The lesson, organic LinkedIn authority is more effective and sustainable than cold outreach. When you position yourself as the go-to expert, clients come to you. The call to action could be, if you're a consultant tired of cold outreach and you want to build a LinkedIn presence that generates consistent inbound leads, drop a comment with the word leads below and I'll send you a breakdown of the exact system we use. Can you see how natural that is? The story ends up building trust and the lesson positions you as an expert. And then the CTA invites them to take the next step. So here's the tactical shift here for you. Every single story you tell on LinkedIn should end with a CTA. Either invite engagement, offer value, or invite them to work with you. Because the story builds the trust, but it's the call to action that actually drives the conversion. So as we put all of this together, the first step is to choose your story type. Decide whether you're telling an origin story, a transformation story, or a lesson story, and then rotate between the three of them to keep your content varied. The second step is to use the story structure framework, right? Structure your story with a hook, context, conflict resolution, and then the lesson. This keeps people reading and delivers a clear takeaway. And then the third step is to connect every story to your offer. So end with a soft call to action that invites engagement, offers value, or invites them to work with you. And here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say that you're a consultant who helps B2B SaaS founders and you decide to tell a transformation story, right? So the hook could be a SaaS founder came to me 6 months ago spending 10K per month on ads and getting 0 qualified leads. The context would be he was a B2B SaaS founder at the $2 million ARR stage. He had a great product, but his lead gen was all paid ads and the leads were low quality and his cost per acquisition was through the roof. The conflict was that he was about to increase his ad spend to 20K per month, thinking more volume would solve the problem. But I told him more ads won't fix this, you need a different approach. So the resolution was, we positioned his LinkedIn presence, built a content strategy around his ideal client's pain points, and created an engagement system. Within 60 days, he was getting 5 to 10 inbound DMs per week from qualified prospects, and this cut his ad spend in half. The lesson: organic LinkedIn authority is more cost effective and sustainable than his paid ad strategy. When you position yourself as the expert, high quality leads come to you. And then the call to action is, if you're a SaaS founder tired of burning money on ads and you want to build a LinkedIn presence that generates high quality inbound leads, drop a comment with the word organic and I'll send you a breakdown of how we help SaaS founders do exactly that. Now that's the complete storytelling framework: story type, the structure, and the call to action. Now when you use this framework, your stories become conversion tools and not just engagement bait. So once you master all of this, what you'll find is that your content will be much more memorable, because when you tell stories, people will remember you, right? They forget the tactics that you shared, but they'll remember the story. And when you think about any clients that you have, they're going to remember if you help someone to double their revenue. This is the type of thing that will actually stick in someone's mind in the way that just information and tactics alone won't necessarily. The second thing is that you build trust faster. So when you share your journey, your struggles, and your lessons learned, you become more relatable. So people think, this person's actually been where I am. They understand my challenges, and it's this trust that converts prospects into clients. The third thing is that your authority grows because every single story that you tell demonstrates your expertise, your results, and your unique perspective. That ends up reinforcing your positioning as the go-to expert. So over time, people start to see you as the authority in your niche, not because you told them you're an expert, but because you showed up to them through your stories. Now, this is the exact storytelling approach that I've used to build a presence with over 55,000 followers and generating over 10 million impressions in the last year alone. And it's the same framework that we've leveraged for our clients to generate over 100 million impressions, and one of our clients gaining over 4,000 new followers in just 30 days while attracting high quality inbound leads. So we know that the framework works as long as you commit to it consistently. And you can see here on just one of the accounts that we control, over 70 million impressions in the last year or so, and the 4,000 new followers on one of our client accounts. So with all of this said, I appreciate that doing this can take a bit of time, right? And it does take strategic execution. So if you do want to accelerate your results, what you'll want is a system that actually handles your content strategy, your storytelling, the posting, and your engagement in a way that actually builds authority while attracting premium clients. And to have that, what you need is a full LinkedIn media engine, really a done-for-you system that consistently positions you as the go-to expert through strategic storytelling and value-driven content. It's the exact same approach that I've leveraged and we leverage for our clients. So if you do want the breakdown of how that full LinkedIn media engine actually works, including the storytelling, the content creation, and more, drop a comment below with the word story, and then I'll get those details sent over to you. But even if you just implement what I've covered in this video on your own, you will see a noticeable increase. But if you do want to accelerate your journey, move much faster, comment the word story below. I'll get that completely free breakdown sent over to you. Outside of that, I hope you found this video helpful. Do let me know if you did, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.